Well, good evening once again, and welcome to the Monday Review Show. I hope the new starting time hasn't caused too many problems with your schedule. It's now 8 o'clock, confirmed 8 o'clock every Monday, 8 o'clock UK Irish time. We're on the same timeline, and glad to have you on board again, watching in. Don't forget, we are on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're also on YouTube. If you'd like to send in any questions or make any comments or to either myself or to Keith, you're more than welcome to do. So welcome again, Keith Hackett. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Keith, the incident, if we call it that, with the assistant referee and Liverpool's Andy Robertson, not Robinson, is still... it's still causing a lot of debate and discussion and talk. Have you any updates on that you know of?
Well, I mean, the outcome was that the Football Association reviewed very closely. I think they took statements. Well, they did take statements from the player and the assistant referee. It would appear that the assistant referee apologized to the player. And the outcome is that no further action.
So what did he apologize for?
Well, I don't know whether... I mean, there's no question that in that incident, he lost his composure. You know, when I talk about refereeing and you talk about refereeing, I put it in an area of the C's in refereeing. Control, communication, common sense, consistency, composure. And composure is so important. And for me, he lost his composure. It didn't look good. There's no question it didn't look good. The PGMOL initial review is, we're going to take you out of the heat and until the investigation is over. And in fairness to the authorities, they got it done within a very short time frame for the FA. So they did actually come out with their decision on Friday. I think that a lot of people in the game that actually were happy with the decision generally. They felt that was in the interests of football. But again, I made the point, and I think it was misread. I made the point that if the assistant referee had been found guilty, that's the FA, they're responsible for that, then the PGMOL as his employer has a problem because they've now got to, as his employer, determine if an act of gross misconduct had taken place. They didn't have to call any of that because the FA said, we're satisfied with the investigation, we're satisfied that this was more or less an accident, and therefore no further action, no further discussion would take place. So the thing's been closed off. So obviously, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we had the Mitrovic situation, where the player was in the face of the referee, Chris Kavanagh. That, of course, was duly reported. Understand that in the English FA, the acts of discipline at the elite level are dealt with by an independent panel. So the independent panel, which looks after discipline at the elite level, made up of ex-players, ex-managers, hopefully ex-referees.
Hopefully, yeah.
They determined that the player was guilty, and they gave him an 8-week suspension. Now, we then learned that 3 of those were because of the incident of the red card. So there were 2 incidents. There was the red card, and then there was the follow-up. And the FA have appealed it. So we don't know what the outcome is.
On the basis of what? Too lenient?
Yeah, they believe it's too lenient.
Yeah.
I mean, I expressed an opinion that it should be a minimum of 10 games. And I think I based that on the history. They'd had 2 cases earlier over recent years where punishments in that order had been administered, and therefore that's where I thought, well, if there is a precedent here that's been set, and therefore look at that and then determine the punishment. But they decided 8 weeks, and the FA have appealed it.
Their manager was also red carded in that game. What do you know? What he got? Does he get?
I think again a lot of discussion and debate on that, saying that this punishment was too lenient. I think he got a fine, and he got a couple of games touchline ban, and I think people thought it ought to be bigger, but it's not. And
just for clarification, in case people are wondering, is a red card for a manager a 3-game ban, a straight red card like it is for a player?
I think effectively the situation is reviewed on a 1-by-1 basis.
Right, okay.
So I think they look at the case because, of course, one of the interesting things when the law was written, and it happened to the Spurs' current manager of Tottenham Hotspur, who received a red card a week ago. In that incident, he wasn't necessarily guilty of doing anything, but because there was a number of his coaching staff involved, he got the punishment, and therefore, in that sense, it was quite interesting. We've had a very interesting sort of period, because one of the things that also happened a week ago was the Tottenham versus Brighton game, where there were 2 clear penalties. The referee, Stuart Atwell, was absolutely in good positions, looking at the offences, did nothing. Neither did the VAR, John Brooks. Almost before the evening was out, after that game, there was an announcement from the PGMOL saying that John Brooks would be suspended and taken off future games. What happened then was that was happened on a Saturday, I think. On the Monday, he refereed at Burnley, top of the Championship game. And then later in that week, he was 4th official on a Champions League game. I think what is so important here is that if you make an announcement that a match official is suspended, don't think that match official can hide. Now, I don't want the guy hanging, but the point that I would say is this: why was it just the VAR that was crucified by the PGMOL? It was the referee who must always be responsible for applying the laws of the game on the field of play. So therefore, my view is that you may question the VAR, but not in public, and take him off a game without the public knowing. But then I would be saying to the referee, you're the man in charge, you're responsible, and you've let the guy down. You've not come in.
So on international appointments, they don't come from the PGMOL.
No.
So John Brooks already have been appointed, let's say 6 weeks ago.
Yep.
So now, just again for clarification, I know the answer, but just so people know.
Yeah, sure.
Could they recommend to UEFA to take him off that game?
Oh, yes.
And if so, do they have the power to change?
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily have the power, but this isn't about who has the power base. It's about the correct information being pushed through to UEFA, and then UEFA referees committee make that effective decision. But just thinking about Atwell in that game at this weekend, he wasn't suspended. He had a game. He was VAR, and he was VAR in the Brentford versus Wolves game. And I can assure you that Tierney was caught out of position. He's the guy that's had more appointments this season than both Taylor and Oliver, our top two referees. So he's in that upper echelon of the senior referees in the league. He was caught out of position, and a foul took place. And the foul was by David Rhea of Brentford on a Wolves player, Totti Gomez. It was a clear penalty kick. And interestingly, in the review program today, I watched intently as to how Dermot Gallagher would deal with this. And in fairness to Dermot, who I've criticised in the past, he came out very, very clearly. This was a penalty. You're not going to believe this. The guy who was the VAR was Stuart Atwell. So he was referee last week, and he dropped two clangers, putting it bluntly. And this week, the referee was effectively, the VAR was effectively punished by being publicly, you're not having games in the Premier League. And Hatwell got away with it. And then Saturday, he makes a mess of the Brentford Wolves game. So, I feel for Howard Webb. I think Howard has got a very difficult job. There's high expectations that he will get it right. And I do believe genuinely that he will. He's got to be given time. He's probably just realising that the pool of talent, either to come in on a succession plan and current referees in the Premier League, there's a gap. I watched Michael Oliver referee at the weekend, calm, correct in his decision making, and all Howard has to do is say, "This is what I want from my referees."
Could they be accused, Keith, the PGMOL, of circling the wagons, particularly on the Andy Robertson issue, that case, just going back to that again, where
they've
thrown cold water on the whole thing?
Yeah, well, I think that in fairness, having been the boss of the PGMOL, disciplinary matters of that nature are picked up by the FA. Yeah. You can only act on what the FA have said.
Yeah.
Because you cannot go against the FA disciplinary panel, and neither can you then in employment law suddenly say, well, it doesn't matter what they say, we're going to suspend you. The outcome was that they were quite clear that they interrogated the incident very clearly. I must say that some of the video clips that I watched were really compelling, and I thought there was a point at which I generally thought this guy's in trouble, and I think refereeing has come out the winner in terms of him being found not guilty. But I think also the FA and the PGMOL have to make it very clear to their match officials: do not put your hands anywhere near a player. Now, in the same way, the messages coming out from lots of the media, which I think have been positive in saying very clearly, players must not put their hands on a match official. So let's watch this space, and hopefully that particular incident will create a better understanding of where the line in the sand is drawn.
Okay. Just moving on, Keith. There was an incident in South Africa just this last week. A guy sent me the clip. Showboating. Now, in this instance, the player had the ball. He was 1 foot over the ball, the other foot over the ball, and then he'd do a twirl around. The ball never moved, and he's twirling around. And then he knelt on the ball and with both knees, and the referee blew up and gave a free kick against him, an indirect free kick against him. So there was uproar about that. And I remember myself cautioning a player from Kaiser Chiefs way back, and where this player was doing something similar and then sat on the ball. And I gave a free kick and a yellow card against him. And again, I was criticized because they said, "Oh, that's all part of the entertainment."
I think this is clearly a player, and in your case, a player being disrespectful to their opponents,
Yeah,
and
exactly the
disrespectful
way I felt.
to the game. And therefore, for me, I have no hesitation. I think that if the player has every right to try to feign his opponent by doing step overs and all that happens, but when he takes a view of kneeling on the ball or sitting on the ball, then my card, like yours, is going to flash very quickly.
Yeah,
so I applaud that referee. I think he's done the right thing.
Yeah.
I think people have to understand that, the game has to be managed effectively, and you're looking for the game and the respect for the game from players and from match officials in that situation. Don't make your opponents look foolish.
Yeah.
It's unseemly. It actually damages the league itself, in my opinion. That's the effect that it has. We've got problems that I've touched on in the past here in England with time wasting and time delaying and tactics.
Oh my goodness!
I was at a game on Saturday, and I witnessed it, and I sat there, and I thought the young referee was having. This was a non-league game. This was just below the Football League. It was a terrific game. I thought the referee handled the situations very effectively. He did the talking. He ignored when a player went off. He'd feigned injury, in my opinion, to have a water break, and then he was rather reluctant to let the player back on. And they were having a bit of a go around me, and I said, I think this referee's great for me. I think he's doing exactly the right thing. Go to the other side of the pitch and ignore the guy that's tried to make fool of him. And but I do think this is additional pressure that referees don't want. And, I think it's all built in this old question, isn't it, around respect. Referees have to earn respect. And I think weak referees, players will always take advantage of. I think weak fourth officials, the technical staff will take advantage of it. I think in England, under the management of Howard Webb, I think we just perhaps need to see some tightening up of the management of players, the control of players, and the application of the law. And I think this soft approach, soft touch or light touch that they talk about is not the laws of the game. And players are currently taking advantage of some of our, if you like, less prominent referees.
Yeah. On Howard Webb, how much authority has he? Because Mike Riley is still there, is he not, until the end of the season?
Yeah, and I think that's probably a problem. I think in reality, what they've done is they've split responsibilities at the PGMOL. They appear to have said, okay, we want the guy who's in charge of referees to concentrate on refereeing and not the business as a whole, because it's a £23 million business.
Yeah,
but I'm critical. I have been critical this week about it because I think I have two problems. The boss, or the former boss of the SG1 group, which is the Premier League referees, it's known as SG1, was a guy called Adam Gale-Watts. He was.
What does SG stand for, Keith?
Select Group.
All right, Select Group.
Select Group 1.
Yeah.
And so the Championship referees are Select Group 2.
Okay.
Both sets are professional. Now, when we look at SG2, SG1, the management of SG1 was under the responsibility of Adam Gale-Watts, a former assistant referee, managing people like Taylor and Oliver. That in itself, I couldn't see working, because what you need is a guy of great experience, and experience is the real counter here, and with a degree of authority. what we had was, so we had him, and a few weeks ago they moved him on, and I thought that's a good move. But then what happened, and this was before Howard came in, they put John Moss in. John Moss is a good communicator, that there's no doubt, but he's no international refereeing experience, and he's got to deal with the likes of Taylor, Oliver, and have a link ideally with UEFA and FIFA to know what's going on. You've got to be in that pool to be able to understand how is the world looking at refereeing and the influence of that. But then I suspect under Howard's management, Adam Gale-Watts last week was announced as the new technical director. And I'm a little bit flabbergasted, because I think the role of a technical director is the one that communicates how the laws are going to be applied and how you're going to referee, along with looking at every aspect of improving refereeing standards. So here you've got a guy, this Adam Gale-Watts, doing that role, and I'm very concerned that, an old business colleague of mine used to say to me when I was up that ladder in management, in business, moving towards being a sales and marketing director. And I'd been at Durham University, and I was at Durham University when a guy who was the chairman of a conglomerate, we had a coffee, and he said, look, I like your style, and I can understand that you're very courageous, because I wouldn't be a referee in the Football League, which I was at that time. My bit of advice to you is surround yourself, if you want to be successful, with successful people. And I think that's what Howard's got to do. I think Howard's got to bring in support staff with great experience, and not to just look in England, but to look overseas, to look at specific areas that he thinks need to be developed in the referees, and bring those experts in. And if that is short-term contracts in terms of consultancy, or long-term, this is what you're going to do, then so be it. Because at this moment in time, he's taken over a failed organization where we've seen the decline in refereeing standards. It's not just me that's saying it. I'm not looking for a role in the PGMOL. I retired from the role of the PGMOL boss. I know how thorough that you have to be, and there are no days in the week. Every day is a football day, and therefore it's quite all-consuming, because you've got to keep people informed. So it is a job that he is ideally suited to. There's no question, but I think he needs to bring in some real quality people to stretch the current guys. People like Michael Oliver and Anthony Taylor are really good referees. I mean, I watched even David Koo this weekend have a really good game, and I'm thinking that's really good. Then I look and I think, well, Gerard Gillett was a VAR this week. He wasn't out refereeing, and I'm thinking, out of the 20 referees that you've got on that list, you've got to really have quite a lot of them officiating a good number of the 380 games. And then you have to, the ones towards the bottom, you've got decisions to make. Is their career advancing, or is it standing still? And in any business, if you decide that you're going to stand still, then believe me, you go backwards. You don't advance at all. There's no position in football standing still.
Players winding up the crowd. There was an incident last week, I think. Lukaku is playing in Italy now, as far as I know. And there was a bit of argy-bargy, and he had just scored, but he went to the opposition fans and he was saluting them very sarcastically. Players surely shouldn't be allowed to do that. Do you remember a couple of years ago where Arsenal player, did he move? Well, Anelka, was it? And he ran down to the opposition fans and was winding them up.
Yeah.
that's a potential for disaster.
Yeah, and should be met with a yellow card. I mean, I've no hesitation. I mean, look, I think that currently across Europe, we're again the league and the country that has the least number of yellow cards, and with that, the least number of red cards. I'll have that information next week. I'll really off how many yellow cards, how many reds, and I think that we really do need to consider just pulling back a bit and getting a little bit of control, winning a bit of respect, and just setting ourselves a task to say, look, we're going to earn respect, and if they don't give us respect, then we're going to deal with it. And I think that we need more effective management. Management is about, you're a little bit up and down in terms of how you approach the problems. And I think sometimes we spend a lot of time, in the Premier League, I know behind the scenes, there's a lot of work done that produces match statistics of anticipating and advising referees the teams that they're going to officiate, who might be the problem players, what tactics are likely to employ. All those aspects are fed into them. I hope that the concentration over the next few weeks is about the referees and actually saying, look, you need to toughen up a bit.
Effectively, Howard Webb really won't take over until the start of the new season, I guess.
Well, I think he's there. I don't know what freedom he's got. I think. Look, he's 3 months into the job. He did a terrific job in America. The VAR is the best in that country, around the world. I'm beginning to doubt whether, in fact, the VAR is adding to the game in a positive manner, because I think that the way we're operating it at the moment is unacceptable. I'm very clear. I think that we need to bring in some parameters. I think those parameters should be that Howard has a panel of non-active match officials, and at the very least, he goes with experience, and he's prepared to export or import that wherever, so that it's a dedicated list of experts in the VAR room. I want them to have a clear understanding of what is a clear and obvious intervention. I would spread their role unofficially, because I think that if they're in communication with the referee and they see something on the screen, forget the 4 levels of criteria. Hey, ref, you need to watch this player. He's getting a bit out of hand behind your back. Exactly what an assistant referee who's doing his job will do. I know, I've listened in to people like Darren Cann. He's just a perfect assistant referee, advising and being prepared to come in when appropriate. Yeah. So I think there's that. I think I'm moving towards a 30-second time frame. I think that we've got too much energy trying to find a problem and inventing it, rather than actually reacting as referees to an incident on the field of play. We don't have 30 seconds to determine if that's a penalty. Mm-hmm. So if after 30 seconds you haven't found the answer, then you stay with the referee. And
this
I think
was a headline that appeared in the paper.
Very
average referee, very uncomplimentary. But then we know that paper won't refuse ink, and these guys are going to make spectacular headlines because that'll sell newspapers. But at the same time, we have to accept some of the criticism that's coming now. Is it exposing referees that these things were happening in the past, but now VAR is just highlighting mistakes that are being made?
I think that when I look back in my tenure of office, we had usually one key major incident each weekend, 1 out of 10 games. In the Spurs-Brighton game last week, we had 2, and in one game. And there were others that weekend as well. So I think that we're having too many, which
I'd
is
love to know what
undermining.
Stuart Atwell's explanation was for that. Why did he not think there were penalties? I
Well,
mean, if they had happened in the center circle, he would have given a free kick. And a direct free kick in the center circle is a penalty kick inside the penalty area. So, why do they shy away?
I don't know. I mean, look, I think when it comes to a challenge, if we don't know whether it's a foul or not, then we shouldn't be on the field at the elite level.
Yeah, correct.
When it comes to handball, there's subjectivity in it. And we're going to get referees disagreeing about that. And that is, in my opinion, caused by the lawmakers trying to be too specific and actually trying to broaden the words to try and cover every angle. And all they've done is we've got players, we've got the media, and we've got referees inconsistent over what is handball and what's not handball.
Yeah, so, actually, a very good friend of mine here, and an ex-referee as well. He said, "What is now a handball?"
Yeah,
nobody seems to know what a handball is. And I've noticed though that the players are getting used to the thing, but they're now putting their arms behind their back, to indicate to the referee, "I'm not using my hands." But this guy, this ex-referee Jim Dooley, who lives locally. He said to me, "What is now a handball?"
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'll discuss it with Keith.
He's not alone. He's not alone because, this weekend there were calls for a penalty kick to be awarded against Manchester United's Harry Maguire, who was jumping for the ball when it hit his head and hit his arm. And everybody says, well, his arm's in an unnatural position. And you know full well that if you're going to gain elevation, your arms do go out.
Yeah.
We also know that if a defender is putting his arms behind his back, that's not natural to the game. So for me, I think the area of handball, Lee, is grey, and I think we'll have inconsistency. I think on offsides, I'm quite clear. If we're going to stick with VAR, the English Premier League, which is ideally regarded as the #1 league in the world, they've got to have the semi-automated system. I think they just go with that and accept what it says and move on. And therefore, we don't have drawing lines and we don't have to work on broadcast vision. But I think at the moment, Howard's got a task to try and get his troops in line to improve the standards. And the great thing is, he's actually got in Howard Webb, in his own experience, in Anthony Taylor and Michael Oliver, they are regarded as elite referees in Europe. They're regarded highly. Therefore, use them as the benchmark and just keep saying to everybody, this is what I expect. They're getting paid the same amount of money as you. This is what I expect. And if you don't come up to the mark, then Howard's got some tough decisions to make. And I watched a game down below in the league involving Stoke City, and the players finished up in hospital. That's the outcome of this particular illegal challenge by an opponent. And when I look, the referee's 58 years old. Now, that for me, he's had a good career. He needs to move on. And I think we need younger, fresh blood in to give them the experience to be in 5 years' time, ready for the Premier League.
Howard's got to go out into the highways and byways and start looking. There must be lots of talent out there. Yeah. Pete, once again, thanks very much for joining us. We'll do it all again next Monday. And thank you for watching and sending in your comments. Please keep them coming in. We'll be back again at the same time next Monday, 8 p.m. Until then, good night and God bless. Thank you.
Thanks, Errol.